Welcome to Team C's BIS 343 final. This is Lainey Johnson and Michael Burchett presenting on team decision making.
Decision-making involves gathering and processing information to evaluate and decide upon alternative courses of action. Decisions can be made by individuals as well as by groups. We will see that there are distinct advantages to group decision-making over individual decision-making. However, it can be fraught with bias and pitfalls. After this presentation, you should have an understanding of the nature of group decision-making as well as the pitfalls to avoid to making it successful. Group decision-making in its ultimate form looks like this. The group is oriented to and can define the problem. They set a goal, they plan a process, they gather information, and identify the alternatives. The group evaluates alternatives, exchanges information, and through this innovates possible new alternatives. Using the various perspectives, the group chooses an alternative and defines the solution. The group sets that solution in place and allows it to process, and they watch that solution as it unfolds and plays out to evaluate their decision, check the consequences, and gather any feedback that is necessary. That's ultimate form. Let's review decision-making from our own real-life experiences. All decisions made are influenced by several factors. Decisions made by individuals, as those of decisions made by groups, are at risk of subjectivity. Judgments of individuals specifically are at risk of bias. Bias can come in many forms. One is driven by how a decision is framed. Framing bias happens when the outcome of a decision is viewed as a gain or a loss. I see this at play when people ask me whether I see a glass as half full or half empty. I honestly don't know which one is supposed to be optimistic, considering either one optimistic or pessimistic is an example of framing bias. Another individual bias that may come into play in decision-making is overconfidence. People are prone to assume that their judgments are sound, regardless of accuracy. In several examples, over 90% of individuals surveyed believe they are above average. I am 110% confident that this is statistically impossible. Confirmation bias is extremely prevalent in my experience in the business world, probably through no small factor of overconfidence. People are certain that they are right in assumptions and latch on to findings and data that support their convictions. Another factor which affects objective decision-making in individuals is decision fatigue. On the surface, it does not seem to be a debilitating activity to make important decisions. However, exerting the energy required to analyze several alternatives and solely decide responsibility for one is notable. For this reason, making several successive decisions affects an individual's ability to objectively interpret and evaluate information. As the day goes on, the ability to make sound judgments diminishes. As we see, individual decision-making may have its drawbacks. Decision-making accomplished by groups of individuals can capitalize on the strengths of multiple individuals. These concepts are at play in my world every day as I manage a team of project managers. In group-to-individual transfer, group members become more accurate during group interaction. This is true not only insofar as idea sharing enriches each other's knowledge, but the varied perspectives and motivations contribute to this as well. For example, I was debating with someone what might be included in a work process. I was making my point from the perspective of what the customer needs, and my employee was arguing for something seemingly irrelevant. Once I saw the problem from his perspective, I changed my stance. He was looking to include something that would be engaging for our employees. If the employee does not use the process correctly, the customer won't even have a chance to have their needs met. So without that group conversation, I would not have adopted that knowledge. And ultimately, had I designed the process on my own, it would not have been as successful. Complexity impairs group effectiveness in decision-making, though. As a problem gets more complex, the group may not perform as highly as the best individual in the group. I've come to realize that although everyone may want to be involved in the decision-making process, having too many people involved is debilitating. Although the greater the number of individuals, the less the likelihood that the rules for decision-making will satisfy everyone. I encourage groups to make specific decisions such as what will we capture on this form, and what should this report reflect? But for more complex decisions, such as what will the new process for accomplishing this task, I try to limit how many individuals have input. Most of the decision-making rules that might be followed, groups that take a structured approach to decision-making outperform those that do not. If a leader can establish an agreed-upon rule early about how decisions will be made, debate about decisions is more likely to follow the designed path. So obviously, group decision-making can have advantages. However, as we mentioned, it can also have its pitfalls.
The first decision-making pitfall is groupthink. Groupthink occurs when team members place consensus above all other priorities, including good judgment, when the consensus reflects poor judgment or improper or immoral actions. We'll be reviewing some symptoms of groupthink, historical and personal examples of groupthink, and as well as how to avoid it. Some symptoms of groupthink are overestimation of the group. This occurs when group members regard themselves as invulnerable and morally correct, which allows them to believe they are exempt from standards. Closed-mindedness, when members of the group engage in collective rationalization, often accompanied with stereotyping out-group members. Another symptom is pressures toward uniformity, no room for diversity in groupthink. Dissenters are subject to enormous social pressure, which often leads group members to suppress their own reservations. Many teams that fall into groupthink don't look at alternatives or plans whatsoever. A good historical example would be Enron. The leaders behaved in highly unethical ways. They practiced false accounting, and when things got really bad, they even purposely caused the rolling blackouts throughout California. They had a highly competitive culture, and we all know how that turned out. Another example is Salem witch trials. The beliefs of the leader were literally law. Anyone who behaved differently from the norm or spoke out against the trials was labeled a witch and could even be killed. A good personal example of groupthink is the company that I currently work for has a few different office locations across the US. The team that I work on is looked at as the superior team. My supervisor has mentioned this to the team members, and they've began to look at all of the other teams across the US as below them, even to the point where they can no longer work with each other on a normal day. Oh my God, I messed it up.
Hello?
I'm here, sorry.
Oh, just keep going, or not now, but
I know.
I didn't even notice that you messed up until you said, "Oh no, I messed up."
I know, I'm sorry. I should have just kept going.
I wonder if we can splice in.
I know, because you did a really good job. I should have just kept going.
Let's see. I wish I was good at this.
See, I should have written it like you did, where you just wrote literally verbatim what you were going to say. I just put like notes.
Wonder if I can splice.